Hello, my name is Andrew. Welcome to the channel. Today we are talking about dopamine and how using it ineffectively is causing us to feel unmotivated and dissatisfied in tasks that we want to achieve. And I'll be talking about how we can fix this later in the video. So jumping straight into it, what is dopamine? So dopamine is a naturally occurring chemical in the body that helps us with motivation, drive, cravings, time perception, and movement. So 5 pretty big things that we encounter every day. So when we're talking about dopamine, we always have a general level of dopamine running through our body at any one time. And we also have an amount that is readily releasable, an amount that can go into our system to cause those feelings of satisfaction and motivation. So we start at a baseline level of dopamine. And when we do something exciting or something rewarding, something that we've achieved, this baseline goes up. This is what we call a peak. So we have baselines and peaks. So this peak is taking some of the dopamine from that readily releasable pool that we're talking about and pushing it into our system to cause this heightened experience of motivation and desire. Now, the problem with this, although it feels amazing to do so, the problem with this is the peak that happens has to come down, and it continues to go down past the baseline level that we had before because we have used some of the readily usable dopamine that was in the system for the peak, and now it's plummeted and gone below baseline. So our body needs to replenish this and synthesize more dopamine to put into the system. So when our baseline is below our normal level, this is when we feel unmotivated and dissatisfied with things that we are doing. So there are 2 main things that make us feel dissatisfied, or 2 main things that a lot of us do that cause this reaction to happen, that we could be paying more attention to. Number 1 is rewarding ourselves after doing something that we want to continuously be doing, because this undermines the process of actually enjoying the thing that we want to do. And because it deals a lot with time perception, dopamine deals a lot with time perception, when we're rewarding ourselves at the end, it makes it feel a lot longer during the task that we're trying to achieve because we're fixated on this thing that's occurring later. There's a study at Stanford University that talks about this, where they took these kids who had a propensity for drawing. They really liked to draw. They would do this in their own time. They started rewarding these kids for drawing. Every time they would draw, they would give them a gold star. And now they took that gold star away, and these kids had a way less likelihood to want to draw without having this extrinsic reward in its place. So having that dopamine kick afterwards really undermines the process of enjoying the thing we want to do. And the second thing is the opposite of that, doing something that elicits a lot of dopamine before the thing we want to continuously be doing in our life. So because we know that we have a readily releasable pool of dopamine, using a lot of that and spiking it before trying to do an activity that's going to be hard for you or something you don't have natural motivation for is going to make it a lot harder to do that next activity afterwards. So we want to try and avoid that. So how do we fix these issues? What do we do about this? So Andrew Huberman talks a lot about these concepts in his podcast on dopamine. If you want to check him out, I'm sure you've probably seen his stuff. But he talks about an intermittent use of dopamine. So what does that mean? It means not stacking dopamine on top of each other when we're trying to achieve a certain task. So an example of this is when we go to the gym or do study. We need something else to motivate us to do this thing. This may be taking pre-workout, maybe taking an energy drink. It may be listening to super exciting music, something to get us pumped up. Now, we want to try and avoid these things as much as possible because they are spiking our dopamine to a very high level and causing that peak to come down and get us to below baseline afterwards, causing dissatisfaction and causing us to not have a general level of motivation that we want to achieve. So, what does he say to do about this? Obviously, we want to do exciting things and we want to have those really big spikes in dopamine at times because that's what we're aiming for. Like, life is about enjoying these exciting things. But knowing that we have that amount of dopamine that can be released into the system, we want to try and intermittently use that dopamine instead and not continuously use it over and over and over again, or else we'll just have a general lack of motivation and desire in our lives. So he says one of the ways we can do this is on days that you really want to use those energy drinks or pre-workout, flip a coin. If it's heads, you can do it. If not, you go to the gym otherwise, because now you're creating a random and intermittent peak and trough in your dopamine schedule. Secondly, I always forget the other point. The second point is that we want to try and evoke dopamine during the actual thing itself. So we talked about spiking before and the reward after. The best case scenario is actually getting the dopamine during the activity itself. Now you might be thinking, how do you do this? Well, a fun thing about dopamine is that the pathways go through the prefrontal cortex, which is the front of our brain, which has to do with a lot of rational thinking. So, keeping that in mind, when we are doing activity, saying we haven't done the dopamine eliciting thing before, we don't have a reward for it afterwards, while we're doing the activity, we want to evoke something out of that. So we rationalize why we are doing that activity whilst we are doing it. Say it's going to the gym. You're at the gym and you think to yourself, this is really painful, but this pain is leading me to become stronger and a more disciplined individual. And you can get a spike of dopamine from knowing the benefits of doing what you are doing. So, a fun fact about that rationalizing as well, it's like you have opinions and values that you believe in. And when someone reaffirms those values or beliefs, you get a spike in dopamine. That just goes to show that if you can reaffirm your beliefs during the activity, like during studying, you're saying, I'm getting smarter, I'm learning more about this thing, this is really great. And actually believing that, you'll get a spike in dopamine and you'll be able to have that satisfaction level during the activity itself. All right, I hope that was helpful for you guys. If it was, consider leaving a thumbs up and subscribing. I'm going to put some other videos that I have made up on the screen now if you want to check those out. If not, I will see you on the next one. Thanks.